Located between the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea, we could say Colombia is something like the entry and exit door of South America. And you know what? Well, this is Colombia. The long and cheerful beaches of Santa Marta, the La Guajira Desert, the inaccessible Latifa, capital of the leafy Colombian Amazon rainforest. Then there are the islands of San Andres and Providencia, the coffee belt of Quindío, Caldras, and Risaralda. And then there are, of course, the vibrant cities of Medellin, Cali, or Barranquilla. And we can't forget about the historical and proud Cartagena or the frantic Bogotá. Bogotá being the great capital city of the country that, dear viewers, with its Candelaria and its incredible museums of golden art, will leave you absolutely speechless. Yes, we can't really be surprised that more and more travel companies are making Colombia a 100% must-visit destination. But as you might have guessed, this video is not going to be about tourism in Colombia, not at all. It's politics that we do here at VisualPolitik. I mean, it's right there in the name.
In May 2018, Colombia will have its next presidential election, and by August 7th, whoever wins will have begun his new job. Juan Manuel Santos, the current president, cannot run again as he has reached his 2-term limit.
So as Santos' time is coming to an end with this video, we want to take a look ahead and find out what kind of Colombia he is going to leave to his successor. We're going to have a look at the great things as well as the not so great.
Today's Colombia.
A gambling man, a great poker player, and part of one of the most influential families in Colombia, this is Juan Manuel Santos.
Even his great-uncle, Eduardo Santos, was president of Colombia in the late 30s. His family also owned El Tiempo, the most influential newspaper in the country.
In fact, the very same Juan Manuel Santos was for a long time deputy director and a columnist at the newspaper. What we are trying to say is that this family, well, they've never lacked influence, money, or power. So, after 2 terms, the 7th of August 2017 marks the end of his time as president, and to be honest, his level of popularity, it's pretty much at rock bottom. This is even after winning the Nobel Peace Prize due to the deal that he got with FARC. The latest poll numbers when we're making this video show that 65 to 75% of Colombian people disapprove of his governance. So, the question now is, how does a Nobel Prize-winning leader have such strong disapproval ratings from his own people? Perhaps it has to do with his broken promise about the peace deal with FARC. Remember, he assured them that it was going to be the Colombian people and no one else who were going to have the last word on the deal, and, well, let's just say that Santos forgot all about that.
Colombia referendum. Voters reject peace deal with FARC guerrillas. Colombia and FARC sign new peace deal. This time, skipping voters. But
apart from all of this, if there is really something that can make him have such low ratings, well, that would have to be the economy. Yep, during the last decade, this Pacific puma called Colombia, well, it used to have quite strong growth, and it even became one of the most thriving of the Latin American countries. However, lately things have been a little bit different. Actually, they've been really quite a lot different. I mean, have a look at this chart. Today, Colombia is facing a situation of slowdown, which is really much closer to what we'd call stagnation. The latest growth figures show a year-on-year increase of slightly above 1%, and 2017 forecasts don't seem to be that much better at all.
Colombia's economic growth rate will be 1.5% in 2017, according to BBVA research.
As you can see, this is really not a good figure, especially if we consider that most of the richest countries are growing at higher rates. The United States, Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, all of them will grow more than Colombia in 2017. And well, it's kind of supposed to be that when you're a poorer country, you grow more. This is because of something that is called economic convergence. So, well, now the question has to become, what's going on in Colombia? Many blame this situation on the fall of oil and commodity prices. And, in a way, this is sort of right, but there are some nuances that we do need to consider. Now, it is true that at its climax in 2013, oil did represent more than 50% of all the country's exports, more than 30% of all foreign direct investment, and more than 20% of public reserves. But it's also true that for many years, thanks to the high oil prices, the government of Colombia has had more resources than it's ever had before, resources that could have been used to boost a productive and competitive economy unrelated to those original commodities. And this is something that the Santos administration seems to not really have done. Perhaps this is because they've been dedicated almost exclusively to that peace deal with FARC. Anyway, let's now have a look at what are the main weaknesses of the Colombian economy.
Disastrous infrastructure.
For years, Colombia's been, how should we say it, almost a failed state in many areas. These are areas that were controlled by warlords, guerrillas, militias, narcos, all of those unpleasant things. So now imagine how difficult it would be to manage such a country and build complex infrastructure there. But really, the reality is that that's not the whole story. The reality is that infrastructure has never been a major priority for any Colombian government. And the result of this, it's pretty obvious. The infrastructure in Colombia, well, it's really, really bad. Today, to describe Colombia's infrastructure, we couldn't use really any other word than dreadful. Most of their paved roads, they're in a state of total disrepair. And well, what's the result of all of this? And do pay close attention to this because, well, it's almost unbelievable.
Moving a container within the country is twice as expensive as in Mexico or Bolivia, and 4 times more expensive than in Argentina, Chile, or Peru.
In fact, the situation is so disastrous that freight transport between the Colombian ports of Buenaventura and Bogotá is 3 times more expensive than moving the same load from Rotterdam to Frankfurt. Interestingly, there are some reports that claim that sending a container from Cartagena to Bogotá costs 3 times more than sending it to Shanghai. So now you can probably imagine all of the effects that this has on supply costs, prices, and the competitiveness of Colombian companies.
According to a recent OECD report, Colombia is the 3rd world's most expensive country from which to export containers, after Venezuela and Russia.
That's why Juan Manuel Santos decided in 2010 to make changing this his top priority. And it is true that his government has just released the biggest infrastructure plan in the history of Colombia, a private co-funded plan which, under a concessionary system, is actually pretty attractive.
Estamos construyendo el programa de infraestructura más grande de nuestra historia.
Yes, this plan, it actually seems to be well designed, but after 7 years, it's just a bit too late, and it still comes with many problems. To be honest, during his 2 terms, Santos' achievements really haven't been as good as he promised that they were going to be.
Bureaucracy and taxes.
Both the World Economic Forum and the World Bank confirmed that Colombia is one of the countries with the highest taxes on companies in the world, which is obviously something that doesn't help companies to grow and develop. According to the Paying Taxes report that every year PricewaterhouseCoopers publishes, the total of all taxes that a Colombian company has to pay is 69.8% of their pre-tax profits. That's almost 70%, which is significantly higher than in countries like Germany, Spain, the United States. To be honest, it's pretty insane. And I mean, that's not even mentioning the bureaucracy, which has an almost equal level of pure insanity. One day we're really gonna have to make a video about the passion for bureaucracy that Latin America seems to have, but because it would be really long, we're not going to touch on it in today's video. It's just too huge of a topic. But what we can say is that on an average day in Colombia, 15 rules and 3 decrees are issued. Yes, really every single day. And not just that, but according to research conducted by the University of La Sabana, more than 30% of the laws passed are useless and just create costs for Colombian society. And so, what has Juan Manuel Santos done to solve all of these issues? Well, he's done almost nothing. In fact, he has made the situation even worse.
The persistent violence.
It is true that many aspects related to security are improving in Colombia. The uptick in the tourism industry in the country is pretty good evidence of that. In 2016, 5 million tourists visited the country, which is twice the number from 2010 and almost 10 times the number from 2000, which is certainly not bad. However, despite this, in many areas of the country, the situation, it's not really improving.
According to the United Nations and the Colombian Conflict Analysis Resource Center, there is still violence in the most affected areas of the country. That is, the FARC peace deal has not substantially improved the situation in these areas.
In fact, for example, cocoa plant growing and cocaine refining is at its absolute highest. I mean, just have a look at this chart. So, well, now you might be wondering, how is it possible that violence levels and the production of illicit substances has not been reduced since the government's deal with FARC? Well, that's because despite all the marketing from the government, and while the violence by FARC was huge, it actually represented less than 10% of the nation's total violence. And moreover, the areas that FARC have left have not been occupied by government institutions, but by other narco and militia groups, some of them even having a mutual agreement with FARC. After all, the business, it's still very attractive. Now, the peace deal left many things up in the air, and that's why the so-called peace dividend is not giving results as big as the government promised. Now, to be fair though, not everything has been totally bad under Santos's presidency.
The best of the Santos administration.
We have to admit that Juan Manuel Santos has achieved some pretty good things. His government actually brought Colombia to the Pacific Alliance, and this is another thing we're going to talk about in an upcoming video, so do not forget to subscribe, hit that button below. And of course, his foreign agenda has been a great strength of his government. Colombia today is more open to the world than it ever has been before. Further, poverty has been reduced considerably, and the country has attracted lots of foreign investment. But despite all of this, our impression here at VisualPolitik is that the arrival of a new government can really be a positive turning point for Colombia. When Juan Manuel Santos took office, the country seemed to be ready to tackle a real process of transformation, and their oil resources meant that they had the ability to pay for it. However, this, as of yet, it simply hasn't been achieved. In fact, it's kind of been the opposite. Santos leaves a weak economic Colombia and many more future prospects than current realities. So now we'd love to know your opinion. What do you think the future of Colombia will be? How would you rate Santos as a president? Well, you can leave your opinion in the comments below and also in this quick survey. And if you enjoyed this video, you can let us know by hitting that like button. Also, do check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And as always, thank you for watching.